Okay, picture this. Alex stands at his sink, toothbrush in hand, eyes half open, and somehow his hand knows exactly what to do without his brain sending a full meeting memo. It's like his brain has a little autopilot that says, "Relax, I've got this," while the rest of him is still negotiating life choices with the dangling socks. Today, I'm your guide as we pry open that autopilot, laugh at Alex's fashion sense, and learn how habits sneak into autopilot mode using nothing more than biology and a little repetition. Let's zoom into that one repetition. Alex reaches, brushes, spits, victory achieved, and in his brain, tiny cells called neurons whisper, "That felt efficient." One repetition is a pebble, not a tsunami, but enough to ripple. I like to imagine those neurons gossiping about Alex's choices, like it's the office water cooler, and unfortunately for the water cooler, they remember the good stuff when it helps them avoid drama. Now repeat that pebble again and again, and the neurons start arranging chairs in a theater until a whole show happens with no director in sight. Suddenly, brushing becomes a 5-act play that needs no rehearsal. Alex, blissfully unaware, thinks he's just being efficient, but his brain is actually practicing for the habit Olympics. I'll be cheering from the sidelines while taking notes and occasionally poking Alex when he forgets the floss. Here's the punchline. Your brain isn't trying to be lazy when it makes things automatic. It's trying to be efficient, like a tiny minimalist interior designer rearranging mental furniture. Alex's brain learns that certain sequences save energy and time, so it bundles them into a neat package labeled "Do Not Overthink." This is called automaticity, and it's less dramatic than a superhero origin story, but far more useful unless you enjoy thinking about tying your shoes each morning. Over the next few chapters, we'll watch neurons gossip, meet the basal ganglia, no, it's not a villain, and watch how repetition, reward, and context do a conga line until the habit is born. I'll point out things Alex does that are surprisingly scientific, prod him for comedic effect, and give you real tips you can use to design your own autopilot. Consider me your tour guide through the brain's theme park, where the rides are surprisingly educational and occasionally sticky. Before we dive deeper, a quick teaser. What looks like mindless repetition is actually your brain rewiring itself to free up space for bigger thoughts, like what snack pairs best with a nap. Alex is about to become a living example of brain plasticity, mainly because he keeps trying new things, and occasionally because I make him. Buckle up. By the end, you'll be able to explain automaticity at parties and possibly impress someone mildly. Let me introduce you to the neurons. Think tiny, chatty neighbors that shout at each other with electricity and chemical handshakes, always dramatic, but actually crucial. Every time Alex reaches for his phone or ties his shoes, these neurons are firing off invitations like, "You should try this again. It was fun last time." I watch them like a soap opera enthusiast. And yes, they do have favorites, which is bad news for new habits and excellent news for routines we actually want. Between neurons are synapses, tiny gaps where the gossip is exchanged via chemicals called neurotransmitters, which is a word I enjoy saying with dramatic flair in the mirror. When Alex repeats an action, those synaptic connections strengthen because the same neighbors keep having the same conversations, and soon they build a sturdy bridge that's easier to cross. Watching synapses is like watching a neighborhood decide on a favorite pizza place. Once everyone agrees, you don't try the new place as often. There's a fancy-sounding rule called Hebb's principle, which basically says neurons that fire together, wire together, and that's both scientific poetry and a terrible band name. When Alex practices a sequence, like making coffee, then checking his messages, the neurons involved start synchronizing their dance moves until it looks choreographed. I like to imagine them forming a small marching band with tiny banners that say, "We're efficient now," and honestly, that image keeps me motivated. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reshape itself, and no, it doesn't involve actual plastic, which was my childhood assumption and one of the few incorrect facts I held with pride. Alex's brain is constantly remodeling, pruning unused connections and strengthening frequently used ones, which explains why some habits fade and others become stubbornly permanent. I sometimes envy that flexibility, mostly when I forget where I put my phone and wish my memory would just do a little redecorating. Neurotransmitters like dopamine are the brain's little reward confetti, and they show up when something feels good, successful, or just mildly satisfying, like Alex finally opening the jar. Dopamine doesn't only make things pleasurable, it flags actions worth repeating, so your brain says, "Do that again, you did a thing and it was fine." I occasionally bribe Alex with chocolate to see this in action, fully in the name of science and snacks. The brain also prunes away connections it doesn't need. Think of it as Marie Kondo for your neural wardrobe, tossing what doesn't spark joy in favor of what does. If Alex stops doing something for long enough, those synaptic pathways get less traffic and may shrink, which explains why skipping practice is a little act of sabotage. I always tell Alex, treat practice like watering a plant. Skip a week and the drooping is dramatic and emotionally taxing for everyone involved. If the brain had a factory floor, the basal ganglia would be the efficient manager who loves checklists and hates indecision. And no, it's not plotting world domination, it just wants things to be smooth. This structure helps turn sequences into habits by chunking steps together, so Alex doesn't have to micromanage every movement. I imagine it wearing a clipboard and tiny safety goggles, gently nodding as Alex fumbles through his morning routine like a charming amateur. Habits live in a neat little loop. A cue triggers the routine, and a reward seals the deal, sort of like a vending machine for behavior where you press the right button and out pops comfort. Alex's brain loves reliable loops because they reduce decision fatigue. Fewer choices mean more brain power for dramatic things like choosing a podcast. I sometimes narrate this loop like a game show for Alex, complete with fake applause and suspiciously enthusiastic commentary. Cues are the subtle signals that say, "Start now," and they can be anything from a time of day to the sight of a coffee mug or the stress of a looming deadline. Yes, guilt is a cue too, and a sneaky mean one. When Alex places his running shoes by the door, that shoe becomes a cue with the gravitational pull of a tiny motivational black hole. I recommend cue design, like interior decorating. Place the things you want to do where your eyes will find them, and hide the snacks you don't. Rewards make habits sticky by telling the brain, "Hey, that worked, remember it," and dopamine often plays the role of the enthusiastic recorder. Sometimes the reward is obvious, like a chocolate chip, and sometimes it's subtle, like the satisfying feeling of checking off a task. Alex especially loves the latter because it comes without calories. I'm partial to conceptual rewards, praise, progress, or 5 glorious minutes of scrolling, and I'll share how to pick ones that actually help rather than derail you like a tempting donut at a meeting. Habits are context sensitive, which is neuroscience speak for the room matters. Alex will behave differently in his kitchen than he does in a gym or a park, even if the same habit is involved. Changing context can disrupt or reinforce habits, so if you want to build something new, pick a place where the cue naturally belongs and the old cues are absent. I once tried to get Alex to practice guitar in the bathroom because it was quiet, and while acoustically impressive, it led to some confusing habits involving shampoo and rhythm. Sometimes habits go a little rogue, like Alex's uncanny ability to end up watching one more video at midnight, and that's usually because the reward system has gotten a little too enthusiastic. The trick is to identify the cue and reward, then tinker with the routine. Replace the midnight video with a different, healthier reward, and your brain will eventually accept this new arrangement. I like to play detective with Alex, interrogating his cues and offering reasonable bribes in the name of behavioral science. Myelin is the brain's insulation, wrapping neural wires so messages travel faster. Picture your neural messages wearing tiny winter coats that make everything zippier. As Alex practices, more myelin gets laid down around frequently used pathways, transforming sludgy effort into slick, speedy actions that feel effortless. I like to imagine Alex's neurons wearing tiny scarves and racing go-karts, which is scientifically dubious but emotionally accurate. Chunking is the brain's favorite organization hack. It bundles sequences into single units, so tying shoelaces becomes the shoe move instead of a laundry list of finger positions. Alex used to think he had 1,000 micro-decisions. With chunking, it's one decision followed by a sweet, efficient cascade. Imagine writing a long recipe as a single instruction. Make my morning, and boom, your brain executes like a Michelin-starred toaster. Automaticity is when actions feel like basic being rather than activities. Alex gets up, breathes, and brushes as if all three were equally fundamental to existence. This state frees up cognitive bandwidth so you can daydream, problem solve, or awkwardly rehearse conversations in your head. I sometimes envy that effortless mode, especially on Mondays, and I will provide tips so you can coax your own routines into that delightful autopilot. Practice matters, but so do quality and timing. Spacing out repetitions often beats cramming them into one chaotic hour while you're elbow deep in coffee grounds. Alex sometimes thinks doing something once with tremendous intensity equals mastery, which would be adorable if neuroscience agreed, but it doesn't, so we're gently correcting him. I'll share ways to practice that respect biology, short, repeated, and thoughtfully scheduled sessions that build strength without burning motivation. Little bits of friction, like a heavy jar lid or a phone tucked in a drawer, can dramatically change whether a habit sticks. Alex learned this when he put his phone out of reach and suddenly read 3 books in a week. Producing friction for good habits and adding friction to bad ones is the low-drama way to shape behavior without relying on willpower alone. I enjoy tweaking Alex's environment like a mischievous life coach and watching the tiny dominoes fall in my favor. Just because a habit is automatic doesn't mean it's carved in stone. Rewiring is slower but possible with consistent, designed change. Think long-term gardening rather than demolition. Alex managed to swap a microwave lunch habit for meal prepping by slowly changing cues and rewards and, crucially, by moving his precious instant noodles out of the line of sight. Consider habits flexible sculptures rather than ancient runes. With steady chips and good tools, you can reshape them. We begin with the universal truth. Starting is the hardest part, so start ridiculously small, like 2 minutes small, because the goal is momentum, not perfection. I told Alex to practice a new habit for only 2 minutes, and he responded like a man given a lifetime supply of excuses. To his credit, he started, and that small action often extended into a real session. Trust me, give the 2-minute rule a try. It's the Trojan horse of habit formation, harmless and surprisingly effective. Habit stacking is adding a new habit onto an existing one, like gluing a sticky note to a post-it that already does the heavy lifting. Alex stacked flossing after brushing, and now flossing happens with Olympic-level consistency. The trick is to choose a stable anchor habit and attach the new one right after it so your brain gets a built-in cue. I enjoy designing stacks for Alex, like culinary pairings, coffee and journaling. Anyone? But fewer casseroles, more behavioral elegance. I told Alex to redesign his spaces so his cues do the nudging. Put workout clothes in plain view, keep healthy snacks front and center, and tuck temptations away like secret agents. Changing your environment is often the path of least resistance because it persuades your future self rather than demanding heroic willpower in the moment. I take pleasure in making small environmental edits for Alex and watching him blame my interior design for his newfound productivity teamwork. Pick rewards that reinforce the habit rather than undermine it. If your reward is junk food after a run, you might be sabotaging your goal with delicious irony. Alex replaced his post-workout pastry with a favorite podcast episode, and suddenly workouts had both pleasure and purpose without the pastry paradox. I'll help you pick rewards that feel real and motivating. Yes, that might involve bribes, but let's call them strategic incentives. Accountability can be a powerful catalyst. Tell a friend, join a group, or use an app that reminds you and makes your progress visible. Alex reacted strongly to public accountability, mostly because he likes to win and slightly because he fears mild humiliation. Social feedback amplifies the reward signals and makes slip-ups less attractive, so choose your accountability wisely and kindly. I'm not above arranging a weekly report card for Alex, which he calls motivational paperworks, and I call science. Tracking is less about scoring yourself and more about feedback loops. Alex keeps a simple checkmark calendar and watches streaks form like candy-coated habit evidence. Small tracking rituals make the invisible visible and tend to sustain momentum because humans love patterns, streaks, and anything that resembles a game. I'll give you simple templates that worked on Alex, no spreadsheets required, just consistent kindness and a pen you don't mind losing occasionally. When a habit falters, it's often because the context changed. Alex tried to keep the same morning routine on vacations and was rudely reminded that hotel rooms have no moral obligation to your cues. Life is messy, and habits are context-sensitive, so plan for disruptions and have portable cues or lean strategies for when normal life goes sideways. I tell Alex, expect bumps, not betrayal, and he nods solemnly while secretly hoarding travel-sized toothpaste. Relapse is part of the process, not a moral indictment. Alex missed a week of running and dramatically declared himself offline forever, until I reminded him that humans are biological beings, not broken vending machines. The smarter move is to treat relapses as data. What happened, why, and how to plan differently next time. I'll help you reframe stumbles into learning. And if Alex cries into a single frozen pizza, that's his business and my cautionary tale. Sometimes the reward undermines the habit. Celebrating productivity with sugar can create a feedback loop you didn't plan for. Alex discovered this when his study sessions became a pastry-fueled fiesta. To fix it, choose rewards that support long-term goals or make the reward contingent on sticking with the routine a few times. I like negotiating with Alex. Do your work, earn the podcast. It's equal parts diplomacy and bribery, but it works. Willpower is a finite resource, and treating it like a magic wand gets you burnt out. Alex tried to rely on sheer force of will and ended up dramatically convinced he was just tired of willpower. Design your environment so your future self has fewer battles to fight, and use habits to minimize willpower expenditure. I enjoy gently reminding Alex that willpower is like a smartphone battery. Use it wisely and keep a charger handy. Stress can hijack habits and send you to old, comforting routines that are less helpful, which is exactly what happened to Alex during a busy week when he reverted to late-night snacking. In high-stress times, you can buffer habits by simplifying them, adding social support, or choosing low-friction fallback options. I'll show you how to build those buffers so your good habits are less likely to become collateral damage when life gets dramatic. Some habits morph into behaviors that don't serve us anymore. Alex once turned harmless grazing into a full-on snack saga, and we had to intervene with gentle environmental edits and humor. Spotting when a habit becomes toxic means checking impact. Is the habit helping your long-term goals or just providing short-term relief? I'll help you identify the signs and set up low-drama interventions that feel kinder than punishment and more effective than shame. Quick recap. Repetition strengthens synapses, myelin speeds signals, the basal ganglia chunks steps into habits, cues trigger routines, and rewards make them sticky, plus context is the unsung hero of the whole system. Alex learned this, sometimes the hard way, and now he wields habit knowledge like a cheerful wizard of small changes. I've been your narrator, teacher, and occasional mischief agent, and I hope you feel both smarter and a little more empowered to design your own autopilot. Here's a simple plan. Pick one tiny habit, attach it to an existing cue, choose a non-undermining reward, track progress for 30 days, and reduce friction for the habit you want to keep while adding friction to the ones you don't. Alex tried this, often with comedic setbacks, and ended up forming a routine that actually improved his day without turning him into a rigid robot. Take small steps, be kind to yourself when you stumble, and celebrate the little wins, even if those wins are as small as making the bed. Tools that helped Alex: a visible cue, a 2-minute start, habit stacking, a tiny tracker, and a supportive accountability buddy, that's me, whether he likes it or not. Apps, calendars, and simple physical changes in your space can do heavy lifting without drama, and I'll link some friendly suggestions in the description for those who like guided help. Remember, technology is a tool. Use it to nudge, not guilt, your future self into better patterns. Habits are a long game. Change is rarely instant, but with steady, small nudges, you'll see real shifts in weeks and major shifts in months. Alex's transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened through tiny wins stacking up and my relentless cheerleading, which I admit might be a conflict of interest. Be patient, adjust intelligently, and treat your habits like gardens. Water them, prune them, and occasionally sing to them if you're into that. You don't need to overhaul your life to make big changes. Pick a realistic target, apply the brain-friendly techniques we talked about, and celebrate the progress no matter how small. Alex did, and he's proof that small actions beat grand intentions. Be curious about your brain, be playful with your approach, and if you ever need a lab partner for behavioral experiments, I know a stick figure named Alex who's always suspiciously available. Go forth, design your autopilot, and may your synapses be ever in your favor. Thanks for coming along on this brainy little tour. If you enjoyed poking around in Alex's autopilot, hit like, subscribe, or at least ridiculously amuse your future self by trying one tiny habit this week. I'll be back with more playful science, more mischievous nudges for Alex, and more ways to make your life smoother without removing the joy. Until next time, be kind to your neurons and maybe give Alex a trophy. He did try after all.